Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build a kitchen. Surely you haven't seen the title and thumbnail, and I've just bamboozled you into thinking that I'm building an actual kitchen. But no, believe it or not, I lack the skills to do that. This is the 35th scale German small field kitchen HF14, or Kleiner Feldkoch 14. Why do you have to shout German like that? It's the law. This is a plastic model kit from IBG Models, and I figured it would be something fun and a bit different from the usual. The box art shows the kitchen, one person eating, and what appears to be a ghost in the background. Maybe they passed away after eating the food. Inside the box, we find a single sprue moulded in grey plastic. Everything on the sprue is quite nice and neat, though, as always, some cleanup is going to be needed, but not too much. All the parts went together relatively easily with minimal cleanup. And by relatively easily, I mean there was some fiddliness, but it wasn't caused by any moulding issues or any real problems with the kit itself. The detailing is sharp and crisp. I don't know anything about the real thing, and while I did try to find some historical images, I didn't find much, but I would say that this is a pretty decent representation. It would probably work really well as part of a diorama, and you could do a lot of interesting things with it. The kit comes with some decals, which look to be some sort of information plates, or maybe a menu, I have no idea. I can't actually make out if they've even got words there, or just little dots. I'm sure they're fine as far as decals go. The instructions look about the same as I've seen in other IBG kits. It's a black and white booklet, and it's rather large, but it's not a huge fold-out, so if you ask me, it's good. The diagrams are, for the most part, clear and easy enough to understand. There was a couple of points where I got a little bit confused, but confusing old Herbert isn't exactly the most difficult thing. That said, it's not the most complicated kit to build either, so let's get to the gluing together of bits of plastic. The first thing I do is glue together this large pot, which I assume is for distributing the food, or maybe it's for storage. I clearly have no idea. It does go together easily though, and then the lid goes on top like so, as lids often do. If you're a perfectionist, you'll probably want to do a little bit of putty work here. Not me though. I set it aside and begin assembling the main body of the cooker, kitchen. I would figure the entire thing and the accessories that go with it would be the kitchen, and this would be the cooker. Does it really matter? Probably not. The main body is made up of a few parts, and thanks to the keying, they all go together pretty easily. There is a little bit of play to the parts, and you might have to do some eyeballing, but it shouldn't be too much of a hassle to get this assembly together. Before we put the top on, you might want to install this inner pot part, I guess you might call it. If you plan to model the kitchen with the lid closed, this part is not really important, and you could omit it with no problem. However, I want mine open, so we're going to need this. There's no keying, so this is another part where you might have to do some eyeballing. Then, the top assembly can go into place. This is pretty easy to position. I add some little handles next, and they're not especially hard to place, but I would suggest waiting a while to put them on. I knocked them out of place at least 700 times just handling the model, so I would suggest leaving them until way later. I glue the chimney together next. This has keying, so it's pretty easy to get lined up properly, but you might still need to kajigger it a bit to minimize gaps and get it as neat as possible. Depending on your tastes, it might still need a bit more work. Lids for the rectangular openings go on next. I have no idea if these are storage or cooking or warming compartments, and I guess it doesn't really matter unless you want to model them open with something inside of them. I don't though, so I guess the closed lids are hiding secrets from me. I'm okay with that. It's probably just sauerkraut anyway. Here's another part that got repeatedly knocked out of place. This tap. Perhaps the lid over this compartment hides boiling water. Delicious. The chimney goes on next, and there's a fairly obvious round mounting point for it to go onto. Initially I did have this around the wrong way because of reasons. The little nubbins on the chimney should face forward and away from the big pot thing. I follow that with this bar, which goes along the front here, and probably serves a very important purpose. Underneath the body, there's a couple of little grates. I don't know. I assume these are fire related. There are two of them, which are slightly different sizes. Make sure you put the right piece in the correct place, or the Field Kitchen Club will laugh at you, and then you'll feel real bad. Next, we have a paddle. I don't know if it's actually called a paddle, but that's what it looks like, so that's what I'm calling it. I would assume this is for stirring, or giving out paddlings to naughty German soldiers. Initially I put this in the wrong place, because that's just what Herbert Erpaderp does. You can probably see some of the mess the glue left behind. Maybe the Field Kitchen Club is going to laugh at me. That's gonna make me feel bad. Anyway, moving on, it's time for the frame. And this is the more fiddly portion of the build. First, I glue this piece of bracing to one of the frame halves, and then, unsurprisingly, I glue the other half of the frame onto the other side. And that's not so fiddly, is it? Getting this part into place and in contact with both halves of the frame was though, and I never quite did that. Maybe I put the frame halves together wrong. I did my best with it and moved on. This bar, which I assume is related to the braking system, whatever it is, it's pretty simple to place here. There are two, I guess, hitch connection points. You really do know all the technical terms, don't you, Herbert? I sure do. And these go on the top and bottom of the frame at the front end, if we assume the end this is towed from is in fact the front. Now it's time for suspension. There's a leaf spring that goes on either side of the frame. I did my best to ensure that I had both of them on the same way. I wasn't totally sure if they had a forwards or backwards way they should be facing, but I tried to get it right anyway. We're going to need at least one axle to hold the wheels, so I put that on next. There's no keying for this, but if you look at the leaf springs, it's fairly obvious where it should be sitting. It did take a bit of nudging and kajiggering, but it's easy enough to get into the correct position. At this point I decided it was a good idea to add the frame to the body, and it probably was. It is a bit before the instructions instruct us to do this, but it was looking like it would be really fiddly to add the braking gear to the thing without the rigidity and extra holding area that the body will provide. There are some guides on the bottom of the body for the tabs on top of the frame, so it's pretty simple to put this together. You can see that short rod isn't going to be a problem anymore, so here's a new piece to constantly nudge out of place while handling the model. I think this might be a handle for the brakes, or maybe it's just for fun. It's time to assemble the brake rigging, and I've got to say, this was my least favourite part of the build. First, I glue the brake shoes onto the ends of this beam. There are notches on the beam and corresponding tabs on the brake shoe parts. Do make sure you put these on the correct side. I briefly misunderstood the instructions here, and assumed this would be glued directly onto the frame. That is incorrect. I soon realised there were some small parts that should hold it there. Instead of adding both of them, and fitting the brakes in what I perceived to be a more difficult way, I attached the wheels. The first one pretty much dropped right into place nicely. I did have to enlarge the hole on the second one, which isn't anything too tricky. There is a lot of play to these wheels, so I had to do a bunch of eyeballing and nudging to get them on as straight as possible. Even after the glue has bonded, they still wobble quite a bit, which is kind of annoying. There's a pair of little hubcap things, I guess you might call them, that go on the outside centres of the wheels. There's not a whole lot to that, you just slot them in the holes in the centre of the wheels. I then decided that it would be easier to glue the brakes onto the wheels and then join the mounting parts to them. Then I figured I should get one of the mounts in place so that I can attach the brakes at the right height. It was a lot more fiddling around than is shown in the video here, and it was actually kind of annoying. These wheels, while they do look nice, are rather flimsy. Once I had the brake bar, or whatever you want to call it, where I thought it should be, I kajiggered the second mounting bit into place and nudged everything into as close to the correct position as I could. I think I did okay. At the front, between the two frame parts, I add the stand. It wouldn't do to have your kitchen sitting at a wild angle now, would it? Then I glue the round lid on. I glue this both at the hinge and where it contacts the chimney, just to make sure it stays there. Around the rim there's a few what look to be butterfly nuts. These are clearly to lock the lid into place. These were quite fiddly to get into place. The only thing to guide them is a faint nubbin showing where they should sit. A little hole for them to slot into would have been better. The final touch is the large pot thing we put together at the start of the build. There's no keying, so it just sort of sits here on the frame. I guess if you were using this in a diorama, you could put it somewhere else, like it was in use or something, or maybe tipped over on the ground, whatever floats your boat. And that's it. We're now ready to cook sauerkraut in the 35th scale small field kitchen HF14 from IBG. I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out. It's something a bit out of the ordinary, and it was mostly fun to put together. However, the further I got into the build, the more tricky it got to hold the model without nudging parts out of place. If you were watching the stream, you may have noticed my frustrations about that. I would suggest one way to deal with that is to simply have more dainty little fingers, or maybe just adding the smaller, easily knocked parts last. The wheels and associated gear were also a bit annoying to put together, because the parts are thin and therefore a bit flimsy. Maybe waiting for the glue to bond would have helped there, but probably not that much. Either way, it's not impossible to put together, and for the most part I did enjoy the build. One petty complaint that I do have is that the box art shows a large ladle of some sort, and I would have liked to have that and maybe some other cooking related bits and pieces. That would add a lot of interest to the model. I've not looked, but in 35th scale, it is fairly likely that you could find those sorts of things. You could probably also find some food, probably from the likes of mini art. I have an idea that I might like to model some sort of stew in the open pot of this thing. I'm not quite sure exactly how I'll do that yet, or even if I will, but I think it's a good idea. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments section below. If you want to watch me build kits like this one live, check out my Twitch channel, which is where I build most of the models you see on this channel. The link is in the description below. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell if you want to see more, and if you'd like to see my videos a bit early before there's any ads, consider becoming a patron or a monthly member on Ko-Fi, or Ko-fi, whichever it is. You can find links to those, and all my other things like Discord and social media, in the description below. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thank you for watching. Farewell.